kids, where are you? It's time for all the art to tell stories.
The sun hung high in the sky, a blazing orb that seemed to scorch the very air. The desert stretched endlessly in every direction, a sea of golden sand dunes that shimmered in the heat. It was a harsh, unforgiving landscape where life clung precariously to existence. But for Cam, the desert was home. Cam stood at the edge of a small oasis, his dark eyes scanning the horizon. His face was weathered, lined with the marks of a life spent under the relentless sun. His body was lean and muscular, honed by years of traversing the desert. He wore a simple tunic and trousers, both made of lightweight fabric. Beside him, a small caravan of camels stood patiently, their humps full of water. These were not ordinary camels. They were the pride of Cam's tribe, bred for endurance and strength. They were his companions, his lifeline in the desert, and his means of delivering hope to those in need. Cam's mission was clear: to lead his caravan across the desert to a small village that was suffering from a severe drought. The village, known as Al-Qadir, was located deep within the desert, far from any major water source. Its people were hardy, but even they could not survive without water. The wells had run dry, the crops had withered, and the livestock had perished. The village was on the brink of collapse, and Cam was their only hope. He had received the plea for help from a messenger who had braved the desert to reach Cam's tribe. The messenger had been near death when he arrived. His lips cracked and bleeding, his body emaciated from days without food or water. But he had delivered his message, and Cam had listened. He knew the risks of crossing the desert at this time of year, but he could not turn his back on those in need. With a final check of his supplies, Cam mounted his lead camel, a sturdy beast named Zafir. The other camels followed obediently, their heavy loads swaying gently as they moved. The caravan set off, leaving the safety of the oasis behind and venturing into the vast, open desert. The journey was grueling from the start. The sun beat down relentlessly, and the sand seemed to radiate heat, making the air shimmer like a mirage. Cam guided the caravan with a steady hand, his eyes constantly scanning the horizon for signs of danger. He knew the desert well, but it was a place that could never be fully tamed. It was a land of extremes, where the line between life and death was razor thin. As the hours passed, the heat grew more intense. The camels plodded on, their pace steady but slow. Cam could feel the weight of the sun on his shoulders, and he knew that the camels were feeling it too. He allowed them to stop briefly at a small outcrop of rocks, where they could find some shade. He gave them water from his own supply, knowing that they would need their strength for the journey ahead. The rest was short, but it was enough to rejuvenate the camels. Cam pressed on, his determination unwavering. He knew that every moment counted, that the people of Al-Qadir were depending on him. He could not afford to fail. As the sun began to set, the temperature dropped rapidly. The desert, which had been a furnace during the day, became a freezing wasteland at night. Cam wrapped himself in a thick cloak, but even that was not enough to keep out the cold. The camels huddled together for warmth, their breath visible in the frigid air. Cam kept watch through the night, his eyes scanning the darkness for any signs of danger. The desert was home to many predators, both animal and human, and he knew that they would not hesitate to attack a vulnerable caravan. But the night passed without incident, and as the first light of dawn appeared on the horizon, Calm felt a sense of relief. The second day of the journey was much like the first, with the sun rising high in the sky and the heat becoming almost unbearable. But Calm pressed on, his resolve unshaken. He knew that he was getting closer to Al-Qadir, and that thought kept him going. As the caravan crested a large dune, Calm caught his first glimpse of the village in the distance. It was a small cluster of buildings, surrounded by a wall of crumbling stone. The sight filled him with a sense of urgency, and he urged the camels to move faster. But as they approached the village, Calm noticed something strange. The gates were closed, and there was no sign of life. The village was eerily quiet, and Calm's heart sank. Had he arrived too late? He dismounted and approached the gates, calling out to the villagers. There was no response. He pushed against the gates, and they creaked open, revealing a scene of devastation. The village was in ruins. The buildings were crumbling, and the streets were littered with debris. The air was thick with the stench of death. Calm knew that the worst had happened. The villagers had perished, their bodies left to rot in the sun. Calm felt a wave of despair wash over him. He had failed. The people of Al-Qadir were gone, and there was nothing he could do to save them. He sank to his knees, his head bowed in grief. But then he heard a sound. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it was there. A soft moan coming from one of the buildings. Calm's heart leapt with hope. He rushed towards the sound, his eyes scanning the ruins for any sign of life. He found her in a small hut, hidden beneath a pile of rubble. She was a young girl, no more than 10 years old, her face pale and her body weak. But she was alive. Calm gently lifted her from the rubble, cradling her in his arms. She was barely conscious, her breathing shallow. He gave her water from his supply, and she drank greedily, her strength slowly returning. As Calm tended to the girl, he noticed something else. There were others, hidden in the ruins. They had survived the drought, but just barely. They were weak and malnourished, but they were alive. Calm knew that he had to act quickly. He set up a makeshift camp in the village, using the supplies he had brought to provide food and water to the survivors. He worked tirelessly, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he tended to the sick and injured. The days passed in a blur of activity. Calm's presence brought hope to the village, and the survivors began to rally. They worked together to rebuild their homes and restore their community. Calm taught them how to find water in the desert. He taught them how to conserve their resources and how to survive in the harsh environment. As the village began to recover, Calm knew that his work was not yet done. There were other villages, other people who needed his help. The desert was vast, and there were many who suffered under its harsh conditions. With a heavy heart, Calm prepared to leave Al-Qadir. The villagers gathered to bid him farewell, their gratitude evident in their eyes. If you like our stories, please like, subscribe, and turn on the little bell so you won't miss exciting stories every day.
You are also welcome to share it with family and friends to listen to the story together. Love you.